Hastings Chess Club was the most exclusive establishment in Manhattan, where crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across Italian marble floors. Eleanor Reed methodically polished each handcrafted chess piece, her movements precise and practiced after 3 years of being invisible to the wealthy members who treated the ancient game as just another status symbol. "Careful with that knight," barked Richard Mercer, a silver-haired investment banker. "It's worth more than you make in a month." Eleanor simply nodded, hiding her knowledge behind a practiced mask of subservience. What these elitists didn't know was that chess had been Eleanor's salvation. Growing up in a small apartment with her grandmother, they'd played on a plastic set from the corner store. Her grandmother, once a promising player in her youth, had taught Eleanor that chess wasn't about the material of the pieces, but about the mind behind the eye. Moves.Eleanor watched as Alexander Pierce, the club's resident Grandmaster, strutted across the room like a peacock. At 35, he was handsome in a cold way, with piercing blue eyes that rarely showed warmth. His arrogance was legendary. He'd gained fame not just for his brilliant play, but for the cruel way he demolished opponents. "Chess is Darwinism on a board," he often proclaimed. "The superior mind always prevails." Tonight was the club's annual charity gala, where New York's elite gathered to feel virtuous while writing tax-deductible checks. Eleanor moved silently between tables, collecting empty champagne flutes as Alexander held court. "The problem with chess today," Alexander announced to his admirers, "is that too many people think it's democratic. It isn't. Some minds simply aren't equipped for the complexity." Eleanor felt her cheeks burn as she bent to pick up a fallen napkin. She'd studied Alexander's games for years, dissecting his style, understanding his weaknesses. In another life, she might have faced him as an equal. "We need something entertaining before dinner," declared Camilla Whitmore, the club's social director. "Alexander, perhaps a demonstration?" Alexander's smile turned predatory. "A demonstration requires a victim, an opponent." His gaze swept the room before landing on Eleanor. "What about our cleaning lady? It might be amusing." The crowd tittered with excitement at the prospect of such mismatched entertainment. Eleanor froze, caught between humiliation and an opportunity she'd secretly dreamed of. "You," Alexander called out, pointing directly at her. "Do you know how to play chess?" Eleanor hesitated, years of hiding her passion, warring with the fire in her heart. "I know the basic moves, sir," she answered softly. "Perfect." Alexander clapped his hands. "Ladies and gentlemen, prepare for a quick execution before your salmon tartare." As Eleanor walked toward the demonstration board, she felt her grandmother's voice whisper in her mind, "Chess reveals character, child. Remember that." Eleanor sat across from Alexander at the ornate demonstration board, aware of the amused glances from the audience. The hand-carved ebony and ivory pieces gleamed under the lights, each one worth more than her weekly salary. "White or black?" Alexander asked with exaggerated courtesy, clearly expecting her to not understand the significance of the choice. "Either is fine, sir," Eleanor replied, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. "How generous." "Take white, then. You'll need the advantage." Alexander winked at the crowd, who chuckled appreciatively. Eleanor moved her king's pawn forward 2 squares, the most classical of openings. Alexander immediately began his performance. "Notice how beginners always start with the most obvious move," he lectured the audience. "No imagination, no subtlety." He countered with the same move, creating a symmetrical position dot. As the opening progressed, Eleanor played the Re Lopez, a solid, time-tested opening. Each move she made was textbook perfect, yet appeared simple enough that Alexander continued his condescending commentary. "She's stumbled into the Re Lopez by accident," he remarked. "Like finding a Rembrandt at a garage sale without recognizing its value." By move 15, however, Alexander's smirk had faded. Eleanor's play wasn't just correct, it was precise, purposeful, and increasingly dangerous. Her pieces coordinated in a harmonious dance across the board, creating subtle threats that were difficult to counter. Interesting choice, Alexander muttered, no longer playing to the crowd as he studied the position with growing concern. The spectators sensed the shift in atmosphere. What had begun as entertainment was transforming into something unexpected. William Chun, a retired professor and decent player himself, leaned forward with newfound interest. "She plays like she studied Capablanca," he whispered to his companion. Eleanor maintained her composed expression, but inside, years of secret study were finally finding expression. She'd analyzed thousands of Grandmaster games, including every one of Alexander's published matches. She knew his style aggressive, tactically brilliant, but sometimes overconfident. When Alexander finally committed to an aggressive pawn thrust that weakened his king's position, Eleanor felt a calm certainty. It was the same mistake she'd seen in his game against Dominguez in the U.S. Championship 3 years ago. "Careful now," Alexander said, his voice carrying less conviction. "The position is getting complicated." Eleanor's hand hovered over her queen momentarily before moving it to a square that threatened multiple weaknesses in Alexander's position. The crowd gasped collectively as they began to realize what was happening. Alexander stared at the board, his face flushing as he calculated the variations. Every line led to significant material loss or worse. "Where did you learn to play?" he demanded, forgetting his audience. Eleanor met his eyes for the first time. "My grandmother taught me the moves. The rest I learned by watching, by being invisible." The luxury chess club had fallen completely silent. Wealthy patrons who moments before had been laughing at the prospect of a quick demolition now stood transfixed. Eleanor's quiet confidence contrasted sharply with Alexander's growing agitation. "You've studied," Alexander accused, as if she'd committed some crime. "Every day for 15 years, Eleanor replied, moving her knight to G5, threatening a devastating fork. Alexander wiped sweat from his brow, painfully aware that his reputation was crumbling with each move. The position had become critical. His king, once secure behind a wall of pawns, now faced multiple threats. Worse, the crowd was beginning to whisper, "Is Pierce losing to the cleaning lady? That's not just luck. Look at her, she knows exactly what she's doing." Eleanor maintained her focus, refusing to be distracted by the shifting atmosphere. Her grandmother had taught her that chess was about patience and vision, seeing the board not as it was, but as it could be. Alexander desperately sacrificed a bishop to relieve the pressure, but Eleanor calmly accepted the material and continued her inexorable advance. Her pieces coordinated perfectly, each supporting the others in a symphony of strategic dominance. "Check," Eleanor said quietly, moving her queen to H4. Alexander's face drained of color as he realized the depth of his predicament. Every escape route was blocked, every defensive resource exhausted. In 3 more moves, he would be checkmated regardless of what he played. "I resign," he finally said, his voice barely audible as he tipped over his king. The room erupted in astonished murmurs. Victoria Harrington, the club's president, pushed through the crowd with undisguised amazement. "Where did you learn to play like that?" she demanded. Eleanor stood, smoothing her uniform. "Chess doesn't care about your clothes or your bank account. It only cares about the truth of the position." Alexander stared at the board, unable to process his defeat. "This is impossible. You're just the cleaning staff." Eleanor finally allowed herself a small smile. "Yes, and that made me invisible. I've watched every game you've played here for 3 years. I've seen all your strengths and weaknesses." William Chun approached, respect evident in his eyes. "Young lady, you play at international master level, at least." "I wouldn't know," Eleanor replied. "I've never had a rating or played in a tournament. Victoria exchanged glances with several board members. Well, that might need to change. Immediately. As the crowd buzzed with excitement, Eleanor noticed Alexander still staring at the board, his world upended by a woman he'd never truly seen until tonight. The morning after her stunning victory, Eleanor arrived at the Hastings Chess Club at her usual time, uncertain what to expect. Instead of cleaning supplies, she found Victoria Harrington waiting in the lobby with several board members. "We've been doing some research on you, Ms. Reed," Victoria said, gesturing toward the leather armchairs normally reserved for members. "Please sit." Eleanor perched on the edge of a chair, feeling out of place in her worn jeans and sweater. The night before seemed almost like a dream. "You've never played in a rated tournament," Victoria continued. "You have no official chess identity. Yet you defeated a Grandmaster with a 2,700 rating in spectacular fashion." "I just played the best moves I could see," Eleanor replied simply. Robert Keller, a silver-haired venture capitalist and club treasurer, leaned forward. "Ms. Reed, what you did wasn't just play good moves. You demonstrated profound strategic understanding and tactical vision that takes years to develop." 20 years, Eleanor corrected. "My grandmother taught me when I was 7. Victoria placed a folder on the table. "We have a proposition. The club would like to sponsor you in upcoming tournaments. We'll cover all expenses, provide coaching." "I don't need coaching," Eleanor interrupted softly, "and offer you a new position here. Not as cleaning staff, but as our resident chess instructor." Eleanor blinked, unable to process the sudden change in her circumstances. "Why would you do this?" "Partly because your talent deserves recognition," Victoria admitted. "And partly because having discovered you will make the Hastings Club legendary." Eleanor thought about her tiny apartment, her grandmother's worn chess set, the years spent studying games and library books because she couldn't afford proper training. And Alexander? She asked Dot as if summoned by his name. Alexander Pierce entered the room. His usual arrogance had been replaced by something more complex, a mixture of humiliation and reluctant respect. "I analyzed our game all night," he said without preamble. "Your 16th move was extraordinary. I would have played bishop to d6, but your queen maneuver was superior." Coming from Alexander, this was unprecedented humility. "I'd like to offer you coaching," he continued stiffly. "Not because you need technical help, but because I know how the tournament world works. The politics, the pressure." Eleanor studied him, seeing for the first time not just the arrogant Grandmaster, but a man whose entire identity had been shaken. "Why would you help me?" Alexander hesitated. "Because talent like yours appears once in a generation. And because I have some amends to make." In that moment, Eleanor realized that her victory had changed more than just her own circumstances. It had cracked open something in Alexander that might, with time, resemble humanity. "I accept," she said simply. "Both offers," Victoria smiled. "Then welcome to the other side of the chessboard, Ms. Reed. I think this is the beginning of a remarkable story." 6 months later, Eleanor found herself in the plush ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria, site of the prestigious Manhattan Invitational. Her journey from cleaning staff to rising chess star had been meteoric and controversial. Many in the chess world whispered that her victory over Alexander had been a fluke, or that she was secretly using computer assistance. "They always need to explain away what they don't understand," Alexander said as they reviewed her opening preparation. Their relationship had evolved into an unlikely partnership. His arrogance hadn't disappeared, but it had been tempered by respect. "Focus on the board, not the whispers," he advised as Eleanor prepared for her final match against Sophia Marlowe, the current women's world champion. The tournament hall buzzed with excitement. Eleanor's story had captured public imagination, bringing unprecedented attention to chess. Camera crews from major networks positioned themselves around the playing area, While spectators crowded behind velvet ropes, Eleanor wore a simple but elegant navy dress, a far cry from her cleaning uniform, yet modest compared to the designer outfits of the other competitors. Her grandmother's locket hung around her neck, her one concession to sentimentality. "Nervous?" asked Sophia as they shook hands before the match. Her tone was friendly, but her eyes were calculating, assessing, only about making the best moves. Eleanor replied not as they began to play. Eleanor felt a strange calm descend. The whirlwind of the past months, the intensive training, the media attention, the complete transformation of her life faded away. There was only the board, the pieces, and the infinite possibilities between them. Sophia played aggressively, sacrificing a pawn for initiative in a complex Sicilian defense. It was a sophisticated psychological choice against a newcomer presumably prone to nerves. But Eleanor had spent years studying in silence. Pressure didn't disturb her focus. It sharpened it. She declined the sacrifice, choosing a prophylactic move that neutralized Sophia's attack before it could develop. From the commentary booth, Grandmaster Jenkins remarked with surprise, "That's an incredibly mature decision from Reed. She's playing like someone with decades of tournament experience. By move 30, what had begun as a sharp tactical battle had transformed into a subtle positional struggle. Eleanor's pieces controlled crucial central squares, while Sophia's attacking chances had evaporated. Draw?" Sophia offered quietly, extending her hand. Eleanor studied the position one final time. There was a win there complex and requiring precise calculation through multiple variations, but definitely present. "I think we should play on," she replied gently. 12 moves later, Sophia tipped over her king in resignation as the crowd erupted in applause. Eleanor had won the Manhattan Invitational in her tournament debut. As reporters swarmed forward, Eleanor felt Alexander's hand on her shoulder. "Congratulations," he said, genuine pride in his voice. "Though I knew this would happen from the moment you checkmated me." 5 years later, Eleanor Reed sat across from Alexander Pierce on the terrace of her Central Park penthouse. The Manhattan skyline glittered beyond them, a visual reminder of how far she had come from the woman who once polished chess pieces for wealthy patrons. "World champion," Alexander mused, raising his glass of champagne. "I'd say I taught you well, but we both know that would be a lie." Eleanor smiled, the confidence of success having softened her once guarded demeanor. "You taught me plenty, just not about chess." Their relationship had evolved in unexpected ways. After that first year of mentorship, admiration had slowly blossomed into something deeper. Alexander's arrogance had given way to genuine respect and eventually love. The man who once belittled a cleaning lady now looked at her with undisguised adoration. "The Eleanor Reed Chess Foundation is officially launching next month," she said, sliding a prospectus across the table. "We've secured funding to establish chess programs in 50 underprivileged schools across the country." Alexander reviewed the document, nodding with approval. From cleaning chess pieces to changing how the game is taught, poetry, Eleanor's success had transformed not just her life, but the chess world itself. Her story had inspired thousands of new players, particularly women and those from disadvantaged backgrounds. Membership in chess clubs had surged nationwide, and collegiate scholarships for chess were at an all-time high. "I received another letter from Maria," Eleanor said, referring to a young girl from the Bronx who had been one of her first students. "She just earned her international master norm." "Following in your footsteps," Alexander replied, though hopefully without the detour through janitorial services. Eleanor reached across the table and took his hand. "That detour shaped everything I am. Being invisible taught me to see what others miss on the board and in life." The evening sun cast golden light across them as they contemplated the journey that had brought them here, from adversaries to allies, from teacher and student to equals, from strangers to lovers. "Do you ever regret it?" Eleanor asked suddenly, inviting me to play that night as a joke? Alexander considered the question seriously. I regret my arrogance and cruelty, but I could never regret the moment that ultimately brought you into my life. He squeezed her hand. You didn't just change how I play chess, Eleanor. You changed how I see the world. As twilight descended over Manhattan, they began setting up the chess pieces for their nightly game. A ritual that had continued through championships, controversies, and changes. The ivory and ebony pieces, the same set from their first encounter, gleamed in the fading light. Your move, Alexander said with a smile. Eleanor moved her pawn forward, beginning another game in their endless, beautiful story.